Hello, welcome to Life Diary. My name is Mikhailu, and today I want to share a true-to-life story about neighbors, quiet lies, and feelings that waited years to be spoken. If you enjoy real emotional stories about love and life, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For years, she told her parents she was in a relationship with the man next door, even though he believed they were just neighbors. When her parents suddenly decided to visit, a simple favor turned into something neither of them expected. What began as pretending slowly revealed feelings that had been hiding in plain sight. This is a story about timing, trust, and realizing that love can live closer than you ever imagined. Hello, my name is Brian. I am 35 years old, and I work as a bartender in a small local bar not far from where I live. I have been doing this job for more than 10 years. I work mostly evening shifts, sometimes nights, and my life follows a very simple rhythm. I live alone in a quiet apartment building in a normal neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. Just a place where people come home after work and try to rest. I have never been married. I never had children. I wouldn't say I was unhappy, but I also wouldn't say I was truly happy. My days were predictable. I slept late, worked late, and filled the empty hours with routine. I knew most of my neighbors by face, some by name, and only a few by actual conversation. That is how I knew Nora. Nora lives in the apartment next to mine. She is 30 years old and works as a hairdresser in a small salon across town. I met her 5 years ago, on the day she moved in. I remember it clearly because the hallway was full of boxes and she was standing there alone, trying to carry a heavy one inside. I offered to help. She thanked me, smiled, and that was it. A simple beginning, like most things in real life. Over the years, we became what I would call good neighbors. We said hello in the hallway. We held the door for each other. Sometimes we talked for a few minutes near the elevator or outside the building. If one of us needed help, the other was there. Once I fixed a loose cabinet door in her kitchen. Another time she watered my plants when I worked late for several days in a row. There was nothing romantic about it, at least not in my mind. Nora was friendly, warm, and always polite. She worked long hours and often came home tired. Sometimes she complained about difficult clients or sore feet, and I listened. Sometimes I told her about the bar, about loud nights and quiet mornings, and she listened. That was our balance. Two people living side by side, sharing small parts of their lives without crossing any lines. 5 years passed like that. I never thought about her as more than a neighbor. Not because she wasn't attractive or kind, but because my mind simply never went there. She was part of my environment, like the stairs or the mailbox. Familiar and safe. I assumed she had her own life. Maybe someone somewhere else. She never talked much about relationships, and I never asked. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was. At the time, everything felt normal. We didn't spend holidays together. We didn't plan weekends. We didn't text late at night. We lived our separate lives behind two doors that shared a wall. I respected her space, and she respected mine. If someone had told me back then that I would one day stand in her kitchen and question everything I thought I knew, I would have laughed. I would have said they were confusing kindness with something deeper. I would have said life doesn't work that way. But life often starts changing quietly, long before you notice. At the end of that 5th year, nothing seemed different. I still went to work. She still left early in the mornings. We still greeted each other with the same familiar smiles. I had no idea that, in her world, a story had been told for years. A story where I wasn't just the man next door. And I had no idea that one visit would turn a simple neighbor into something I never expected to become. I remember the first weeks after Nora moved in better than I ever expected to. At the time, they didn't feel important. They only became important later, when I started looking back and connecting things that once seemed random. After that first day with the boxes in the hallway, we didn't speak much for a while. Just short greetings. A nod. A smile. Sometimes nothing at all. That was normal in our building. People were polite but distant. Everyone had their own schedule, their own worries. It was a few months later when we actually talked for the first time. We both came home late one evening and met near the mailboxes. She asked me if I knew which apartment had been making noise all night. I joked that it probably wasn't me because I was never home at that hour. She laughed. That was the first real laugh I heard from her. Easy, natural, not forced. From that moment on, small conversations became part of our routine. She told me she worked as a hairdresser and that her days were long and exhausting. Standing all day, listening to people talk about their lives, their problems, their marriages. She said sometimes she felt like a quiet witness to other people's happiness and pain. I understood that more than I expected. I told her about the bar, about the regulars who came every night and told the same stories, about the couples who fought quietly over drinks, and the ones who held hands and pretended nothing was wrong. We both worked with people, but in very different ways. Somehow, that made it easy to talk. Over the years, we developed a kind of unspoken understanding. If one of us was tired, we kept things short. If one of us needed to talk, the other listened. There were evenings when we stood in the hallway for 10 minutes without noticing the time. There were weeks when we barely saw each other at all. 5 years passed like that. I helped her when her kitchen cabinet door broke. She brought me coffee the next morning as a thank you. When my sink clogged, she asked around and gave me the number of a plumber she trusted. When I worked double shifts, she checked on my plants. Nothing big, just small acts that make daily life easier. I never questioned it. Sometimes, when I came home late and heard music through the wall, I wondered if she had company. Other times, I noticed she always came home alone. But I never asked. It wasn't my place. I assumed she had someone somewhere else. Maybe a long-distance relationship. Maybe something complicated. Or maybe she was just like me, living quietly and not talking much about it. The truth is, I didn't allow myself to be curious. My life felt stable in its own way. I worked, slept, paid my bills. I didn't expect surprises. I didn't look for change. Nora was part of the stability. A familiar face. A safe presence next door. Thinking of her as anything else felt unnecessary. Looking back, I can see moments that should have made me pause. She remembered details about my work I never thought were important. She noticed when I was unusually quiet. Once, when I came home after a rough night at the bar, she asked if everything was okay without me saying a word. I said yes, of course. That was always my answer. She never talked much about her family. I knew her parents lived far away. I knew they spoke on the phone often. Sometimes I heard her voice through the wall, softer than usual, careful. I assumed it was just family talk. I didn't think more about it. Why would I? In my mind, we were neighbors who had learned to trust each other. Nothing more. Nothing less. I didn't imagine that while I saw us as two separate lives running parallel, she was telling a different story to the people who mattered most to her. By the end of the 5th year, our routine felt permanent. Fixed. Unchanging. I had no idea that one phone call would break that routine completely. That one visit would force us to step out of our comfortable roles. That everything I thought I understood about my quiet life would suddenly feel incomplete. At that point, though, I was still unaware. I went to work. I came home. I said hello to Nora in the hallway. I lived my life believing I knew exactly who I was to her. Just the neighbor. The day everything changed started like any other. I came home in the early afternoon, tired after a late shift. The bar had been loud, crowded, and emotionally heavy in that way only a night job can be. I planned to sleep for a few hours before going back in the evening. I remember taking off my shoes, putting my keys on the small table by the door, and thinking about nothing in particular. Then there was a knock. At first, I didn't move. I thought maybe it was someone else in the building. The knock came again, slower this time. I opened the door and saw Nora standing there. She looked different. Not dressed differently, not unrecognizable, just unsettled. Her face was pale, her shoulders tense, and she held her phone tightly in her hand as if she had just put it down. She didn't smile. "Brian, can I come in for a minute?" she asked. That alone told me something was wrong. She had never come to my door like that before. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the middle of my living room, not sitting down, not moving, just breathing quietly as if she was trying to steady herself. "I need to tell you something," she said. I nodded and waited. I assumed it was about work or maybe a problem in her apartment. Something practical. Something normal. "It's about my parents," she continued. I didn't say anything. I just listened. "They live far away," she said, even though I already knew that. "You know they've never visited me here." I nodded again. "I talk to them all the time," she said. "Every week. Sometimes every day." She stopped and looked at me, really looked at me, as if she was trying to decide how much truth I could handle at once. "For years," she said quietly, "I've been telling them I'm not alone." I frowned slightly, still not understanding where this was going. "I told them I had a partner," she went on. "Someone stable. Someone kind. Someone who takes care of me." I felt a strange tension build in my chest, but I still didn't connect the dots. "I told them it was you," she said. The room went silent. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain needed time to catch up. Me? I said. Nora, I think you might be confusing me with someone else. She shook her head. No. I told them about you. About the bar. About how long we've lived next to each other. I told them we were together. I didn't know what to say. I stood there, trying to understand how 5 years of simple neighborly interactions could exist alongside a completely different story told somewhere else. Before I could ask anything, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and swallowed. They're at the airport, she said. They just called. They're already flying. They'll be here in a few hours. I stared at her. Here? I asked. As in here? She nodded. They're coming to see me. To meet you. My first reaction was shock. The second was disbelief. The third was 100 questions at once. Why me? Why now? How could she think I would just accept this? I never planned for it to go this far, she said quickly, as if she could read my thoughts. At first it was just easier to say I wasn't alone. Then years passed. They never came. I thought they never would. I leaned against the kitchen counter, suddenly aware that my quiet, predictable life had just taken a sharp turn. So what are you asking me to do? I said. She took a step closer, not touching me, just close enough to make her voice softer. I'm asking you to pretend, she said. Just for the visit. Just until they leave. I felt my stomach tighten. This wasn't a small favor. This wasn't watering plants or fixing a door. I don't know if I can do that, I said honestly. I wouldn't ask if I didn't trust you, she replied. You're the only person who knows me here. The only one who feels safe. That word stayed with me. Safe. I looked at her and saw not someone trying to manipulate me, but someone scared of disappointing the people she loved most. Someone who had built a lie slowly, carefully, and now didn't know how to tear it down without hurting everyone. How long are they staying? I asked. 3 days, she said. 3 days. I thought of my work schedule, my routine, my empty evenings. I thought of how easy it would be to say no and return to my normal life. And I thought of how she was standing there, asking me for help she clearly never wanted to need. Okay, I said finally. Her shoulders dropped, as if she had been holding her breath the entire time. She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said quietly. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of something I never saw coming. The hours before her parents arrived passed faster than I expected. Nora and I stood in her kitchen, talking quietly, trying to decide what mattered and what didn't. She told me their names, the questions they usually asked, the small details she had mentioned over the years without thinking it would ever matter. I listened and nodded, feeling strangely calm on the outside, while something restless moved inside me. When the doorbell finally rang, I felt my heart jump. Nora looked at me, took a deep breath, and reached for my hand. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. It just happened. And instead of pulling away, I stayed. Her parents were warm from the first moment, tired from traveling, smiling, grateful to finally see the place where their daughter lived. They hugged her tightly and shook my hand with the kind of familiarity that made me realize how real I already was to them. This must be Brian, her father said, smiling. We've heard so much about you. I smiled back and said hello, feeling both guilty and oddly honored. The first evening was careful. We cooked together, Nora and I moving around the kitchen as if we had done it 100 times before. Her mother watched us quietly, smiling when we handed each other plates or finished each other's sentences without noticing. Her father asked me about my work, my hours, how long I had lived there. I answered honestly, only leaving out the parts that belonged to the truth they didn't know. As the evening went on, something unexpected happened. I stopped acting. I wasn't performing a role. I wasn't choosing my words. I was simply being myself. The same man who came home tired from work, who liked quiet mornings and simple meals, who cared more than he usually admitted. Nora seemed different too. Lighter. More open. She laughed more. She touched my arm without thinking. She looked at me when she spoke, not checking my reaction, just sharing the moment. That night, after her parents went to bed, we stood in the hallway between our apartments. Neither of us said much. Thank you, she whispered. I nodded. You're doing fine, I said, meaning more than just the situation. The next days followed a rhythm I had never lived before. Mornings together, breakfast at the table, small conversations that felt surprisingly natural. I adjusted my work schedule to be around more, and it didn't feel like a sacrifice. When I left for the bar in the evenings, Nora's mother asked me to come back safely. Her father joked that I worked too hard. I smiled and realized no one had spoken to me like that in years. We went for walks. We showed them the neighborhood. Nora leaned into me when we sat on a bench, not because she had to, but because it felt right. I noticed how easily our steps matched, how comfortable the silence between us was. One afternoon, while her parents rested, Nora and I sat in the kitchen with coffee. The window was open. The room was quiet. "This is strange," I said softly. "I feel like we skipped years." She smiled. "I know," she said. "I've lived with this idea for so long. I just never knew if it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like home," she answered. That word stayed with me. I started noticing things I had never allowed myself to notice before. The way she listened without interrupting. The way she remembered what people liked. The way she moved through her space with care, as if everything had meaning. I realized I looked forward to seeing her parents smile, because it made her happy. I realized I missed her when I was at work, something I had never experienced with anyone before. On the last evening of their visit, we all sat at the table longer than planned. Her parents spoke about the future, about stability, about how good it was to see their daughter settled. I felt a quiet weight in my chest, a fear mixed with something else. Hope. When they finally left the next morning, hugs were exchanged, promises were made, and the door closed behind them. The apartment felt suddenly empty. Nora and I stood there, unsure of what came next. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We walked into the kitchen, the same place where everything had felt so easy just days before. The coffee machine hummed quietly. Sunlight filled the room. "I don't know how to go back to before," I said. She looked at me, her eyes honest and calm. "I don't want to," she said. At the same time, we both spoke. Maybe we should stop pretending. The words hung in the air, real and unavoidable. I felt something settle inside me. "I think I've already fallen in love with you," I said, surprised by how natural it felt to say it out loud. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "I think I always was," she replied. There was no rush, no dramatic gesture, just two people finally stepping into the truth they had been circling for years. After her parents left, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Not empty in a sad way, but still, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what we would do next. Nora and I didn't rush into anything that day. We cleaned up together, washed the cups, folded the blankets from the guest room. Ordinary things. The kind of things people do when they don't want to speak too quickly and risk breaking something fragile. That evening, we sat on opposite sides of the kitchen table. The same table where we had eaten breakfast with her parents just hours earlier. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. "We don't have to decide everything right now," I said, mostly because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "I know," Nora replied, "but I don't want to pretend anymore. Not with you." That was the moment when the last distance between us disappeared. Not with a kiss, not with a dramatic promise, but with a shared understanding. We had already crossed the hardest line. We had been honest. We decided to take it slowly, but not to go backwards. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. Not because we planned it, but because neither of us saw a reason to separate again. I slept on the couch, and it felt natural, not awkward. In the morning, we made coffee together, standing close, talking about small things, smiling more than usual. Days turned into weeks. I started spending most of my time in her apartment. Eventually, my place became just a storage room for things I hadn't moved yet. Nora never asked me to move in. I never asked if I could. It simply happened. One bag at a time. One evening at a time. Until we both knew we were living together. Being with her changed my routine in ways I hadn't expected. I still worked at the bar. I still came home late. But now, someone waited for me. Sometimes awake, sometimes asleep, always there. She listened when I talked about work. I listened when she talked about her clients and long days at the salon. We didn't try to fix each other. We just shared the space. We learned each other's habits quickly. I learned she liked quiet mornings. She learned I needed silence after work. We argued occasionally about small things, and we learned how to stop before words became damage. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt rushed. One evening, a few months later, we sat on the couch, tired but comfortable. Nora looked at me and said, "I don't want to lie anymore. Not to anyone. Not even a little." I nodded. "Neither do I." That was when we decided to tell her parents the full truth. Not all at once, not dramatically, just honestly. She called them the next day and told them that what started as a story had turned into something real. That we were together now, truly. That we were happy. They didn't get angry. They didn't accuse her. They were quiet for a moment, then relieved. Her mother said she had always believed the happiness in Nora's voice. Her father said he was glad the story had finally caught up with reality. Life settled into something steady. A year later, on a calm evening after work, I came home to find Nora standing in the kitchen, nervous in a way I hadn't seen before. She didn't make a speech. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I want this to be forever." I agreed without hesitation. We didn't plan a big wedding right away. We talked about it slowly, carefully, the way we had learned to do everything else. A small ceremony. Close people. No pretending. Just the truth. Sometimes I think back to the 5 years we spent living side by side, greeting each other in the hallway, unaware of what was growing quietly between us. I don't regret the time it took. We needed those years to become who we were when we finally chose each other. Now, when I come home, I don't feel like I'm returning to a place. I feel like I'm returning to a life. To a woman who once called me her partner before I even knew I could be one. And this time, the story is real. And that's where this story comes to a close. Sometimes life doesn't change with big decisions or dramatic moments, but with one honest step taken at the right time. What started as a simple, neighborly favor became a real relationship, built slowly, naturally, and without pretending. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Now I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Do you think feelings like this can grow quietly over years without us noticing? And what would you have done in his place? Agreed to pretend, or walked away? Share your opinion in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Life Diary for more real stories about love and life.